Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Josh Heumann. I'm the Curator of Education and Public Programs at the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery. Before anything else, we extend sincere thanks to Charles Stankievech, of course, Director of Visual Studies and Assistant Professor, and his colleagues in the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design here at the University of Toronto. Not only have they made this program possible, but it's also co-presented as part of the MVS Pro Seminar Series. I certainly hope some of you were present yesterday evening for the opening of Kader Attia, The Field of Emotion, which opened at the Power Plant and remains on view through May 13th. The exhibition was born from discussion between my colleagues Gaetan Verna, Director, and Carolyn Kushling, the Curator of Exhibitions at the Power Plant. And I'm pleased to say I've watched Carolyn work tirelessly on this project with steadfast excitement and passion, in close collaboration not only with Kader himself, but also with the support of our Assistant Curator, Nabila Abdelnabi. So the resulting exhibition certainly seems to be quite remarkable, with works that are direct and subtle, with insightful metaphors and multi-layered meanings. So we hope that you'll come back to the Power Plant to see the works without, another 1,000 people of your best Torontonians and foreigners visiting. For Kader Attia's exhibition, The Field of Emotion, we thank presenting donor, the Jack Weinbaum Foundation, major donors, Nadir and Shabin Mohammed, support donors, Lisa Maurer and Andrew Shiner, Elisa Neuten and David Dime, and Peter M. Ross, international art partners, Diversity Art Forum, the Consulate General of France in Toronto, the Goethe Institute, and Institut Français, as well as the support of Luisa Osenda from Galleria Continua, Marie Perriard from Gallery Krinziger, and Rachel Lehman and Jessica Krebs from Lehman Mohan. We also thank Saskia Draxler from Nagel Draxler Berlin and Galleria Continua for lending their important works to the exhibition, as well as Kader Attia's studio in Berlin for their dedicated support. Our sincere thanks also go to Kim Anderson, Chief Stacy Laforme, Kwame McKenzie, Gerald McMaster, and Charmaine Nelson, who played an integral part in Attia's new commissioned film work. To complement exhibitions in the galleries, the Power Plant's Education and Public Programs team offers a wide range of engagement opportunities, all listed in our program guides. I hope you've all grabbed one, but they're all listed on our website as well at thepowerplant.org. All are made possible thanks to generous support from our sponsors. So we extend thanks to our primary education sponsor, CIBC, our institutional sponsors, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council, and to Bank of Montreal, BMO, for supporting the Power Plant's all-year, all-free admission. Today, we will hear from Kader Attia and then transition as smoothly as possible into a conversation between Kader and Charles. Of course, there'll be an opportunity for questions from you, our audience. But for now, I'll call Charles up.
Thank you, Josh, for the welcome, and welcome everyone to the University of Toronto. I want to thank Joshua and the curator, Carolyn, and Gaetan, of course, for the partnership. It's great to do that, and congratulations on the show to all of you, and especially you, Kader. It's not only nice to see Kader's work for the first time in Canada, but for you guys to push ahead and make a commission and really ask Kader to engage with the difficult political legacy of Canada's colonialism, both the Indigenous genocide as well as the often forgotten or let's say glossed over history of slavery. So again, you guys, congratulations on that show. I've only been here a couple of years, and it's been very inspiring to see the amazing programming that's occurred in the city across many of the galleries and museums. And so these kind of urgent conversations in Toronto on natural resources, colonialism, really important global conversations that are happening here locally. So it's just inspiring for season after season to see these institutions and the cities do that. And particularly, it's a honor for our program to be able to partner. So again, thank you for partnering with this and the other institutions we have done so far. This lecture is part of the MVS Pro Seminar Series, the research part, which this year is about art and infrastructure. For those of you here in November, we had Basit Kortan come from Istanbul, the founder of Salts. So that was a partnership with MoCA, and he spoke about his kind of amazing network of galleries there. There are cafes and event spaces, archives, places for discourse. And actually, ironically, or I guess serendipitously, we were trying to get Kader and Basit in conversation about a year ago. And so that time didn't work out, so it's really nice that we could kind of do it all together. And again, Kader, thank you for coming. And it makes sense, because I'm hoping we can get to talk about La Colonie, a space that Kader founded in 2016, which kind of falls within this line of just discourse outside of art and in dealing with politics, just outside of necessarily the museum or gallery space. So for those of you who are here maybe with a friend and don't know who Kader is, a brief introduction would be, he's an artist with Algerian origin, lives in Paris and Berlin today. Most people probably came to his work through the very celebrated Project Repair at Documenta in 2012. And since then, basically has been hard to catch up to him, going on to shows at the MMK, the KW, the ICA, and numerous other acronyms. Finally, of course, to end up here at the power plant. So again, congratulations on that, and also the Duchamp Prize in 2016 and the Miro this last year in 2017. Well-deserved accolades. I kind of first met Kader in Berlin when he was doing the residency at the Kunstwerke, and he engaged in these very public forums in the crash pad, coming in and asking very difficult questions, really engaging in dialogue and asking interesting things in the public forum. And so it's kind of with that spirit that I thought a conversation today for us would be a good strategy. The idea today is to have Kader talk about the exhibition, and then we'll slide into La Colonie. Most people would describe him as kind of, or I've read that he's in the vein of, let's say, an artist as ethnographer or anthropologist or archaeologist and so forth. But again, I think those are a little bit misnomers. He's not an amateur ethnographist. He's not an amateur anthropologist. He's definitely a professional. And we see in the works at the exhibition him actually engaging and bringing into dialogue those professionals together. And in a sense, I would argue, kind of to use a Levi-Strauss term, a bricoleur. The bricolage is a concept for you as a methodology, and that really was nailed home yesterday in the exhibition when, after we were talking, I walked in and I kind of had a foolish experience that I think maybe some of you will have, maybe highlighted more because the show wasn't finished installing. And I walked into the back room to an open, empty space, and the wall tags weren't up yet. And so it was a little bit of, I thought that a video hadn't been turned on yet in the show. I was about to turn away and all of a sudden saw a technician polishing a piece of metal on the floor to reveal the staple. And I think to use an allegorical aspect to introduce Kader, instead of these professional trades that are being labeled on artists as they move out into the expanded field, is to think of the staple as really this material metaphor of how Kader brings things together, different geographies, different stories, different professions, different locations and traumas. And so in a sense, the staple really was brought home as a material aspect in that exhibition last night. Of the cracks in the floor as we walk into this clean, well-lit space, we think is fine and perfect. To reveal, of course, our state apparatus, our cultural and public institutions have cracks in them. And while it might look very clearly that everything's fine, of course, the work like Kader's really articulates that actually there is these traumas that we have to deal with even when they are sparkling and clean at first glance. So it's with that I want to bring up Kader to speak. And then, of course, I also want to challenge the audience because of the new commission that was done, and it's in this place, and I know some people in the audience that are part of the film, to really want to open up the end of the conversation to a dialogue. So really looking forward to questions to kind of continue instead of a one-way kind of video artwork, again, the conversation of what's going on. So with that, Kader, please, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here. And thank you, of course, to all the people who made this exhibition possible, from Caroline to Gaëtan Verna to, there are so many names I can't remember, so please forgive me if I'm forgetting someone. All all of this is not possible with, as we said in North Africa, with one hand. You know, the Berber says one hand doesn't make noise. You need two hands to clap. So this is very important because what Charles was saying right now about the staple is I have to say I never thought about that. I think what really struck me on the very difficult concept of the repair is that I think that after so many travels and ground researchers in Africa, in Germany where I live, in North Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, I discovered that the conception, even the way we define repair in auf Deutsch in German, is we use two different words. We said is Reparation or Reparaturen. In French, you say réparation for everything. In English, we also use sometimes the term fixing, and some other politically repair. In terms of slavery, people are talking about reparation, for instance. I've been very much interested by this ambivalence that. Thank you very much. I've been very much interested by this ambivalence, and I have to say, even though I have a background of philosophy, never as an academic. It's not about amateur, to be honest. I just think that we need the contrary of specialists. I think specialists have no distance with what they are dealing with. I think sometimes artists have this incredible ability to create ellipse between situations, between concepts, between ideas, which sometimes, most of the time, let's say, it's wrong or not relevant, but sometimes things incredible comes out of this. So, doing my researches first as a sort of observateur, you know, watching this very fascinating, sophisticated small object which were repaired in non-Western traditional societies like artifact, calabashes, or any object which just was repaired in a way that the injury of the object was kept after the repair, signified for me a sort of signature, like if the person who was in charge of repairing these items wanted to leave something. I did repair this. It's not anymore it used to be, and it's not anymore injured. And then I started to observe, not only in Africa, by the way, but in the whole non-modern world, in the Greeks' antiquity. I don't know, for instance, if some of you have seen in Istanbul these famous cisterns, which used to be water tanks for the city during the Constantinople Empire. There is one pillar which is held with a head of Medusa that was used in another civilization. So, if some people also have the chance to see the ceramic pot from Japan, those who have been broken and on which the area of the fault that shows that the cup of tea, the ceramic of tea has been repaired, is always painted in gold. This art practice of the repair called kitsugi, it's something that for me is important to also evoke so that we don't stay into this sort of exotic idea of the repair, like poor traditional African society repaired, and it's fascinating because they have no money, they did this. It's not about, of course, it's also a medium, an economic medium process that is at the origin of this very rough repair, but there is something else. And what really start to fascinate me is that when I started to do research seriously, when I stopped to go on the ground in Brazzaville, in Bamako, etc., in Algiers, but I asked in museums. And it started actually with the Museum of African Art in Washington, D.C., on the Mall. I sent them a letter telling them that I would like to investigate the object repaired in their original context that are kept into the museum, in the storages. They immediately answered that they were very happy that someone is interested by that, but have no clue about. So they taught me online how to deal with the database. Then I went there to DC. In 3 days, have learned how to manage to research objects in the database, a huge database of an ethnographic collection. There were so many criterions for object, but not one single about repaired item. And when I talk with the anthropologist about how do you classify those objects which were repaired in their original context, and I said, we never thought about that. And how do you do when the repair object, when the staple is broken because the object is whole? Oh, we change the repair. We repair the repair. We have a conservator here. We change the staple with a new contemporary material. So I start to wonder, how could it be possible to source in the whole Western Museum those objects because they were not taken in consideration, they were not taken care of by the anthropologist, since, let's say, the rise of this modern epistemology on other cultures, I mean, of course, working in a colonial time. It happens that most of the objects which were brought into the West, at the very same time, I mean, at the end of from the end of the 19th century to the end of the independence, I mean, to the rise of the independences, and even after, it happens that those objects which were repaired, either including a local material, or even worse, including a Western modern leftover material, a button of a suit, a piece of tin coming from a milk box, anything that was a sort of ready-made, coming from the Western modern standard object, any object in wood from any ethnic group, including this kind of repair, was put on the side as impure object, was completely neglected. And I found extremely interesting the fact that on the one hand, the way that the injuries, the way that this extreme expressivity of the repair, staples for instance, or those calabash stitched with a very rough string, were not taken care as, I mean, in the real value of them. What I'm talking about is this highly important care on the injury and the repair made by an anonymous reparateur. But on the other hand, the fact that for the anthropologist, the colonial anthropologist, an inclusion of a Western modern item repairing a traditional item was a sort of pollution of this pure idea of what should be the aesthetic of the savage. And for instance, then I start to deepen my researches until I discovered in Munich, for instance, Munich is very important in the tribal art history and market, because just to make a quick parenthesis, at the rise of the Nazi, I'm sure many of you here know the exhibition, the Entartete Kunst, the art degenerated. Many collectors and people and artists who had these objects were selling them, were trying to rid of this object because they fear the repression by the Nazi. So in Munich at the Volkerkunde Museum, I found archives describing clearly that anthropologists were removing the paint of some mask, and because for them a mask painted was not an original one. Was not. And the idea that the traditional culture could have used Western painting to paint wooden traditional object was for them a reason to disqualify the subject in this sort of holy, categorization of what should be the art of the others, the art or the everyday life object of the others. What I found much more interesting is that what do these repairs tell us? They tell us that from the kintsugi in Japan to the medieval repair to the African calabash repairs, they said that what we fear the most actually is to face the injury, because the repair is the injury. It's impossible to think the repair without the injury somewhere. And what modernity has developed and completely dogmatized is that the repair within a modern mind means to be able to go back to the original state of the items as well as the body. Why has the body? Because if you look through history, the moment where this social science field from ethnology to anthropology was neglecting the importance of this repair. I'm telling you this Today, it's just 5 years ago that when after the Documenta project, I received so many feedback by philosophers like Quentin Meillassoux, etc., who says, it's unbelievable that philosophers have never spoken that much about the Reaper. Let's go back in this crossing point between the object and the body. At the very same moment when probably what symbolized so far the end of modernity, the First World War, the huge paradox between this high level of sophisticated technology and still the process of fighting very traditionally in the battlefield, waiting for weeks for a charge, then leaving the trench, and really using classic techniques of battles. This war, the First World War, World War I, has generated something absolutely unexpected in terms of repair. More than 6.7 millions of soldiers worldwide, even here in Canada, went back home with these heavy injuries after the war. You have to know that the war that lasts 4 years, where the weapons were extremely violent and the technique of battle were still very human, has overwhelmed all the fields of modernity, in the sense, here I'm talking about modernity as a technological promise. So the whole surgeons from all sides were struggling to produce the perfect repair of these injuries, injured faces. So what is extremely interesting is that during my whole researches, I discovered that the first very early repair of the faces of the soldiers, because I had to say that in Val-de-Grâce in Paris hospital, I could find a whole archive of portraits, also a little bit in Germany, but more at the Wellcome Foundation in London and in Val-de-Grâce hospital in Paris. Showing the evolution of the repair of the injuries of the faces during 4 years. At the very beginning of the war, the repair were exactly almost the same that traditional societies used to do with calabashes. Staples on the face, stitching the face, an incredible rough process of repairing these injured faces. Why? Because the majority of this repair were made right in the battlefield by young nurses who were just starting and working with this, just working on the one who could have been saved. Then, following the evolution of this repair, it came that the more we went at the end of the war, the repair started to look very much the original face of the people. You really see that in the very late repair, the doctors were able to bring back to these soldiers the original face. How? By using prosthetics. So what you see, because the photographs are in black and white, for someone who has half of his face missing, like the half of a jaw missing, a sculptor has built a sculpture of another jaw, and I saw in archive films that with a string, he just put his prosthetics and he go to the street. What really fascinates me here is the way that after the war, these millions of soldiers have incarnated in their country, in Germany, the country who lost the war. They did not, represented the same thing like in France, where they were celebrated as heroes. That's why in Germany it was very difficult to find photographs. I think many photographs have been destroyed. But there were famous doctors, like Dr. Joseph in Berlin, who has led an incredible book. What is extremely interesting to understand is that what has happened then after the war, when these millions of soldiers were released into society, what did they represented? First, of course, psychologically, they were extremely fragile. Many of them also never went back to society, ended in psychiatric hospitals. But others have been living in the society. Once I was telling the story this morning that Daniel Buren, the artist, when he saw one of my work about that, he told me it's impossible that in France, 1.5 million soldiers came back like this, and they were walking in the street of Paris. It is impossible that the artists of Montparnasse, such as Picasso, have not seen them. It's impossible. And I think the incarnation of these injured faces has also this ambivalent of what do we think is beauty or not. So that's why, going back to the repair of traditional societies, then I went into the aesthetic of the face, as well as the body, but of the face in traditional animist society. And it happens, another interesting thing, is that worldwide, traditional societies have produced masks that actually represent transformed, injured, disturbed faces. The Inuit in North Canada, in Alaska, in Greenland, in Africa. Many of the masks I have juxtaposed with collage are Dan from Ivory Coast, Ibibio from Nigeria, some of the masks representing stroke, some other representing leprosis. So the way that traditional society were using, actually, as Memel Kassi Sylvie says in the film that is presented in the exhibition, the mask to gather the human group. The mask, this mask dancing, acting, was the cement of these social groups. Traditional societies have celebrated illness and difference as another kind of beauty. It's very difficult to use the word of beauty, but they have celebrated it. And what interested me now to continue with, I mean, I needed to talk to you about this because the repairs and handless conversation. It leads us to here, to why I'm here and why you're here and why there is this exhibition here. I have to say that before this exhibition, before I met with Gaetan, with Caroline, I've been to Canada many times, several times. I was at Banff also in Calgary. I've been to Vancouver when I was doing a project in Seattle many years ago. I've been to Saskatoon 10 days to attend a symposium, then I walked through it. I mean, I've been very much interested by Canada and how this country, from someone coming from North Africa with his colonial background, means when you try to just get a little bit of it. A little bit of it means you just to pull the thread of genealogy of the history of this country, which is a very complex one when you arrive, because it's you're used to, but for someone coming from outside, it's a very mixed society. And the first things you want, which I did when I came, when I started to work on the project, after many years of observing Canada, of thinking I would love to do something here, I said I need to meet with First Nations people. Probably the reason I really wanted to go also to Saskatoon at some point was that when I received the invitation to be in this lecture, the name of this city for me was, this is not an English name. This I have to go. And then I look at the map, I said, oh wow, it's going to be something. And I was telling to many people in Europe, I'm going to Saskatoon. Everyone was looking, where is it? Where is talking? Only Canadian people know that, and American also from New York. So what was very important for me was to connect on this ambivalent and difficult question of colonization today, also here in this continent, because obviously the story here is completely different than the one that has happened in North Africa and in sub-Saharan Africa. And like you quoted Claude Lévi-Strauss, that I really admire. I remember when Claude Lévi-Strauss was saying, he says in a documentary that he was giving lessons in Vancouver many years ago about a mask, which was a black mask with big eyes and it was a big nose and big eyes and a small mouth. And he says to his student that he will bring them one day the equivalent built in another culture at the opposite side of the world. And 5 years ago, after he did it, he brought them a mask from Congo, which was a white mask with big holes in the eyes, a very big hole also in the nose, and a big mouth. So it's not even structuralist caricature by himself by finding exactly the same copy. He just like reverse complementary the thing, which I found extremely, relevant. And it came after this sentence where he said, It is because we are all different that we are the same. We are all different. These questions of the individual articulation between the self and the human groups is crucial in my researches. It's not only for me. I mean, of course, I'm very interested by psychoanalysts for many years now. I started to read psychoanalysts I was 15. But it's just that I think I'm without being myself a psychoanalyst, I'm so surprised to see that we are living in a world ruled by politicians and government, and there's not one single government with a ministry of the psyche. I don't get this. Everything we are living today is about these immaterial injuries that have been built by genocide, deportation, slavery, injustice, inequality. I don't get it. When Fethi Ben Slama I interviewed Fethi Ben Slama within the Reflecting Memory. I remember it was in Paris Diderot, is this Franco-Tunisian psychoanalyst who has been working for years with this, what we call lonely wolves, jihadists, Islamist, radical, who pop up at any time and killed people. And he's been contacting the French government with a group of researchers saying that, be careful, guys. Things are going very wrong in the banlieue. You have to send psychologists there to take care of this gap. That the poverty, that also the government of Sarkozy, because Sarkozy, when he arrived, he removed the police of proximity, which was existing in the suburbs. And the police, what we call la police de proximité, were policemen, but very much playing with the young, soccer, they were doing the link. When Sarkozy came, said, no, this is too much money, we waste money here. He removed them. Then we have this wave of riots and another radicalization of the society. What Fethi Ben Slama explained says that a lonely wolf, of course, pop up at any time. Also, Gilles Kepel said so. Of course, there are dark forces on the web that manipulate, that target them. But what we have to understand is that there is which is basically the definition of psychoanalysis, an articulation between the individual and the human groups that is not taken care of. The doctors cannot do it because they need infrastructure and they need power also to do it. And it's for me probably the reason why, as an artist, without defining myself as an artist or this video film as an artwork, but I'm just taking the opportunity of art as an incredible platform to just take, to just really take the opportunity to release and to exchange and to share around these immaterial injuries. So the film Reflecting Memory, which is shown at Power Plant, and is basically, for those who have not seen it, explaining that, starting with a very individual trauma, someone who has an accident and lose its limb, its arm, and it's a phenomenon very well known by surgeons called the phantom limb. Some people have it during 3 months, some other 10 years, it depends. But it's always painful. Sometimes it's a light pain, sometimes it's very difficult. I start to think about this unbelievable phenomenon when a French surgeon told me that, no, the area of the brain that actually communicate to this arm missing is still here. So the nerve sections are still growing because we are also programmed to be automatically repairing, So you cut the nerves and they still grow. But the nerves are searching the other nerves. That's why transplantations works that way. If you lose a arm, Stéphane Romano, the surgeon, who is one of the specialists of the hands, told me that you have 18 hours to transplant the same arms. After 18, the member is dead. But it's pretty much good. If you fix it immediately, an hour or 2 hours, the nerves will reconnect each other. You help them as well, but some of them not. They really reconnect each other. The fact that you don't have nothing, and they are endlessly trying to look for this missing part, create pain. So when I was of course, living in Germany, I'm sure all of you have seen in Germany when you walk in some street of the city. There are some Jewish names on the floor because of the Holocaust as memorial. And I was thinking, living in this part of Europe, also I've been to Poland at some point, etc. I was thinking about the presence of this ghost. Also because Jewish friends told me, "Oh, I will see you in Paris. I don't want to come in Berlin. It's full of ghosts." I have a lot of friends, Jews, even Israeli, living in Berlin now. But she was from South Africa, and she told me I will never go there. So I start to think how this individual phantom limb could be applied, could be compared in a metaphor at a huge scale. At the scale of a civilization. What does it mean if you amputate a whole civilization from its community, or a whole civilization from its dignity? Because colonization, as Fethi Ben Salama says, it's rape, it's deportation, it's exploitation of the body, but it is above all humiliation. Humiliation that is constantly, endlessly repeated in Algeria during 132 years. I don't know how we can deal with these humiliation things here in Canada. So I start to think about different traumas in society, and I have to say that each historian, philosopher, from the Holocaust, from colonization, from slavery, I have been talking to them about this possible comparison. Each one of them agreed that it was clearly possible to compare and then they explain. So the relation between the individual and the human groups in terms of repair became for me a field of investigation and reflection on how do we deal with the repair, with these immaterial injuries that are here forever and that we don't see anymore for many reasons. I'm not going to explain why here. Also, I'm sure you know. But of course, that the denial is a process of living together. It's a natural process, by the way. You know that the human mind forget. If you do not forget, you can become mad, actually. So at the political level, this denial process, this erasure of the injury, the denial needs for living with the injuries, has brought me to even some sort of paradox statements on the repair, that basically the repair is also the unrepairable. And what is much more difficult for us to live is to admit this. Because, as I was saying, if you look at a picture, of the reflecting memory when there is an amputee person praying in front of a mirror and his hand is reflecting in the mirror, and it's clear, you see that it's a mirror because there is a cut. There's a space between the amputated arm and the mirror. Most of the people don't see it at the first time because your mind automatically make the junction. So until now, I think it's clear, excepted that the jihadism, I did not mention the relation between my whole research and the world we are living in now. But it is absolutely clear for me that I took also this opportunity of what is art, to gather so many different people, so many different also from the right to the left, to just share the emotion, the poetry, the contradictions. We cannot, we can disagree as well, it's very important, but just to share it through processes that are formal processes. I always say that I really do care about form. When people tell me that your film are very theoretical, etc., and your work are very formal, very sculptural, very physical, I think the form is crucial, is fundamental. Is this sort of incarnation of the field of emotion? What I did sorry, just to go back. What I did in the project of J'accuse was to continue this engagement of Abel Gance when, after the First World War, he asked these injured faces soldiers to act in his film, which is called J'accuse, in reference to Émile Zola's article to defend Dreyfus during l'affaire Dreyfus, to condemn war Abel Gance was part with many artists and intellectuals after the First World War of a pacifist movement. They have even created different anti-war museums. There was one in Berlin, by the way. And they all refused the invitation. They were so ashamed by their face, they all declined the invitation. He came back to them 18 years after, and the one who was still alive, he asked them to act in the film, because for him, it was not about doing art. He was an activist. It was an act of just, I would compare him with Cassandra in the Greek antiquity, who was condemned to see the La Guerre de Troie, the War of Troy coming, and nobody will believe her. And I think Abel Gance, when he's attending the rise of Nazism, he just wanted to, and the World War II, he just wanted to do a film which would have both gather the people on the fear of emotion arena, and at the same time, and using this, soldiers who have known the war as the witnesses of the war. So, these are images of the film reflecting memory. As I told you, and as Charles explained before, what I wanted to do today with you is much more a conversation, even if I'm only the only one talking at the moment, which I have to say is very enjoyable. I think what I have thought as the last work of the exhibition, in terms of imagining a sort of pathway through which the viewer would go. And it leads to La Colonie. And we talked about this, Charles, yesterday and today. My idea, you have maybe understood it, is that at some point we do fear, even though we love art, we have this passion that leads us towards the front, that is not anymore relevant in the world we're living in. Does it make sense to see that, to see this when people are dying everywhere? Does it make sense when injustice are still coming, attending the rise of this fascism everywhere, the revisionism in Poland? We know what is about. I do trust that art has an incredible, not only poetical power, formal one, to gather in very large range the human groups into a dialogue, even if we disagree each other, but just to reappropriate, to take over this, what is now in the hand of the social media and the mass media, as a narrative, as a dogmatic narrative, or to a Manichaean narrative of the bad, of the good, without subtlety, without exploring things. I was saying that I don't get why the government have no Ministry of the Psyche, for instance. I'm always surprised that the psyche is so diabolized in our modern, postmodern societies. It's something that is some taboo. Or, of course, it has changed a lot, but it's still something. It was very important for me to, after dialoguing with these virtual viewers through representations that are sculptures, collage, films, etc., to try to put him in front of a sort of action moment. In a moment where, in the end, if representation would not be enough, would it be possible to now do not represent only but act? So to stitch, to repair the cracks of a building is not only to enhance my feeling of what represents an architecture as an exhibition space, but also here, a building in Toronto, a city where you want to come with and explore and develop and talk about history and about immaterial injuries created in the past and still living today. It's just to make an ambivalent what Merleau-Ponty would have called phenomenology of perception. You get into a space, you think that you look, but you are not watching with your eyes. It is your body that is watching. And that's why at a certain moment you look down and you see those cracks. So for me, it became extremely important the last 3 years to go beyond the limits of the representation that an entity called an artwork has at some point in terms of ethic and in terms of transmission, reaching the audience, leaving something and also leaving something to the collective, not only as an individual. So I created in Paris a space which is called La Colonie, with this line, which actually obviously removed the word La Colonie. It's this building that you see. It's not so far from La Gare du Nord, and it's a very nice and interesting buildings that has been transformed with a group of 8 people who believed that. Just have to imagine, it's another parenthesis, but will make sense with why La Colonie do exist. After the Charlie Hebdo attack, which really shocked me forever, because I was a reading of Charlie Hebdo since I was a teenager as well. It was very famous sort of satiric newspaper. And then more unbelievable was the Bataclan attack. We decided really that. Okay, it's nice to be also involved in this sort of, paradigm of the aesthetics or symposium, talking hours on the right angle of a postcard, etc. But what about the reality? What does it mean to be? What does it mean to be? Let me show you probably what I don't know who is here, but what does it mean to be part of so many interesting and sometimes, I have to say, very déjà vu symposiums without trying to at least build something that has to do with the contemporary time we are living. What does it mean? It means that in this space where we organize symposiums, in a few days we'll start a symposium on colonial prostitutions, where we did organize symposium on Afrofeminism, which is a question that did not exist in Paris before La Colonie did it, where we did organize, where we will organize another symposium on the relation between the psychoanalysis and the psyche and the jihadism in May with Arab psychoanalysts and French and Germans. The list is very long. What is extremely interesting and important is the fact that after creating such a space which is not an institution, which has open door, people don't pay to get in, you attend so incredible connections between. I remember that Bruno Latour was talking about the Anthropocene during 45 minutes, and when he handed a beautiful Congolese woman who has a hairdress salon at 50 meters from La Colonie, took the microphone and said, Mr. Everyone says Latour, and everything you said today, it's what I said to my customers for 2 years. And then she explained this. And she was explaining what Anne-Aurore Sankale speaks about in the film Reflecting Memory, out of the film, but I can tell you now because she's this plastic surgeon from Senegal. She has an association, making the Senegalese people as much as possible aware about chemical product to whiten the skin, which is a very new problem in Africa, brings skin cancers, etc. And this woman was talking about that. But she was not, she's educated in her field, but she was not an academic from the academia, etc. And this is what we have created at La Colonie. When we have, for instance, discussions also on genders, there was a very interesting discussion with Françoise Vergès on the way that the female body was exploited during colonial time, especially in La Réunion. We had people who were not academic, just women who came because they wanted to talk, they wanted to hear that it was possible to speak loudly about these untold stories. Untold stories are very much part of the continuation of colonization. That's what humiliation works. People who need to talk, need to exchange, even when they disagree. I remember that there was a man, after we screened a film on the Algerian War by Suzanne Candace, whose father was the lawyer of the FLN. It was packed. And the man took the microphone and said, he started like this. He said, okay, so he gave his name. Okay, first of all, I want to say that I am a leftist. Huh? Then I thought that this is going to be something, because when people start like that, you can be sure that it's the contrary. So, colonization brought very good things as well. And then he explained. And then it was a big mess in the room, so I took the microphone and I started to cool down, to moderate, as we say. No, I'm sorry, I mean, this guy, for me, is very important that he's here. I want to hear these people. Otherwise, if we meet all of us and agree on the right angle of the postcard, this is not how we can work and enhance and repair. To repair, you need to involve the descendant of the perpetrators and the victims. And then other people pop up in the crowd, like him. Yeah, I really appreciate that you are saying this. Kader Attia, they were not people from the art world. They were just association activists. And I think this is what I call the action. You have to know that when people in an opening goes to see an exhibition, they have not the same perception of you about the work, but they have a perception. That's why the field of emotion, for me, in the text, I said, it has always been on the hands of politics, but as well of artists. Singers, magnetize the people with the voice, the vibrations of their voice, and poet with the meanings of their words, and also with the prosody, because there is a way to read poems that if you read, if someone reads you a poem in Hebrew or in Chinese or in Japanese, you will appreciate the prosody, the melody of the words. But this field of emotion that has been, I think, probably for the first time in thought history, explained by Aristotle when he was talking about the catharsis. The fact that the crowd goes to theater because they want to heal their traumas, let's say the problem, the deep problem on the stage. They want to be exorcised, I can say this, exorcised for their own problem on the stage. The whole field of emotion is this. It's an arena where the crowd gather to be healed from inside. And this from the worst to the best, from the arts to the fascism. So this is the time that we are living now, and I'm sure when I'm describing you see some figures who are using nowadays the field of emotion. The field of emotion was, for the first time, very first time, back into the hand of populism in Italy at the end of the 90s with Berlusconi, who was, because in Europe, since the beginning of the 80s, since the beginning of the 80s, the left has abandoned the field of emotion. The left got power with François Mitterrand in France, etc. As soon as they got power, they became snobbish. They neglected the forms, they neglected the smells, they neglected the colors, they neglected the screams. It became, oh no. Everything became dry, conceptual, blurred, unexpressive. And the field of emotion cannot float as a cloud forever. There's a moment where powers, worst or good, take over this field of emotion. When Berlusconi rose at the end, he rose actually the whole 80s with his channel TV, and at the end of the 90s, when he decided to become a political party, Forza Italia, he used all his channel TV to develop the same rhetoric that Trump did, exactly the same, except that internet was not developed at that time. Scandals, vulgarity, always like occupying the first part of the stage, and this is a process to federate and to actually take over this field of emotion that the human groups need. Of course, after the 60s, the field of emotion was in the hand of the left. When after 68 in France and in Europe, everywhere, brilliant intellectual, and not brilliant, they were in the street demonstrating. They were part of the public arena. They were taking over this field of emotion. Jean-Paul Sartre, for Algerian War, was with Simone de Beauvoir in the street. Michel Foucault did not like demonstration. He went to the street. Jean Genet was with the Black Panthers in the street. Angela Davis was in the street. At the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, these thinkers also started to die for many reasons. Some of them became also more interested by the money that the American university was giving to them, and they retired from the public arena. I do trust in this because I think that the very big difference between anything and the arts is that the arts gather human groups. We are here together. Yesterday there were people. Even if in a museum you have 3 people per day, but you have to experiment it. It's a physical relation. I'm sure, unfortunately, one day we will have Google to visit museum, but at at the very same time we are talking, still is important to physically experiment an artwork. So that's why I wanted to tell you that these actions took another shape in La Colonie, the space I have created, which is also sometimes a space where between here, where Mamadou Diouf, I think in English he said Dean of the Historian Chair at the University of Columbia or something like this. I mean, il est chef du département. He's a Senegalese historian, probably the most interesting African historian. He's at La Colonie after Souleymane Bachir Diagne, another very high Senegalese philosopher. He's now talking about Cheikh Ndiaye, a Senegalese artist. And we are here. It's a kind of temporary school, one-day workshop at La Colonie with Mamadou Diouf. But also, I come back here because what we created also is a space where after the intellectual fight, we have a nice intellectual drink. After the fight, we relax with a drink and we continue the fight, but with a big smile. And I think what we created at La Colonie is also, there was an article today in Le Monde that I read, l'article disait La pensée comme une fête, thinking as a party. I really like this, because I really trust that also this field of emotion is also a moment where we have to enjoy life, because there is also a possible beauty in life. It's not only about what we hear by those who want to manipulate us. There is a beauty of the world. There is a beauty of life. And I think that what we look for in the arts is this incredible unexpectability of the arts, of the beauty. Beauty is very subjective. We don't appreciate the beauty the same, actually. We sometimes share, but if you and I go to see the Époux Arnolfini of Van Eyck painting, we will like it, of course. How could it be possible that we would not like it? But not for the same reason. And this is extremely important. The fact that we are not articulated with beauty the same. So I think I'm going to end here. And maybe we can continue with questions. Thank you.
Great. So I mean, we got a pretty comprehensive picture of the place. So maybe we can ask a few more complicated questions and then probably pretty quickly open it up to the audience, I think.
Yeah, let's go.
So, aside from where the place is and kind of your desire to create it and what happens there in the audience, I think you've articulated that. I'm wondering, first of all, are there people you work with in starting the space, and what's your participation in it now, and are there other people? What's the team like that makes this place actually work?
Well, I mean, I think everywhere you install a work, as I was saying, you know, with the clapping hands, this is what my father or my mother, I think my mother told me, or my father, the first things you do when you arrive in a place where you have to install the work is to feel the team you will be working with. Mm. And I have to say that, I mean, I have been very lucky, or probably not. No, I don't think it's a question of being lucky, to be honest. It's a question of also loving your work or not. Not your artwork, loving the material. You know, I have this day, I don't want to talk about myself, but I have a sciatica, that's why I'm not standing up. It was sometimes painful to walk, but I cannot resist. I really need to take the hammer, to drill with the guys, I mean, for me there is a relation that you need to build with a team when you are working on a project, which is first this sort of physicality of the work, you know? And then, during the breaks, a little bit later, not at the beginning, everyone gets less shy, and they start to come up with some questions, and also, and it's also a very enjoyable moment because you also exchange with them. Mm-hmm. You see, so this was my experience. Yeah.
Actually, you just almost answered my closing question on repair. Was to ask if you had any repairs in your own body that actually, instead of these cultural and mythological and issues, if you've gone through actual physical body issues that you've had to deal with repair and that's influenced your work.
I mean, I have injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And has that influenced the work at all in a way?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we don't have to go into that.
No, it's fine. I'm
okay. Were there precedents for the space, in a sense, like Vasiv's Salt in Istanbul or artist-run centers, in the art world or other non-art world places, were there kind of, not blueprints, but spaces that you had experienced or heard about that either other artists had started or not, that became kind of influential as you tried to figure out how this was going to happen? Because I imagine it's quite a process and this didn't happen overnight.
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I have to say that, because also I like very much architecture, I've been, sensitive to some space built by a certain architect, like in MMK Frankfurt, because MMK Frankfurt buildings is built by Holland. He was a postmodern architect. And most of the time we don't like postmodern architecture. I have to say, me neither. It's a kind of kitschy things of architecture trying hard to reinvent something, and after modernism is very, modern architecture is so radical, you know. But this Holland was very interesting for me because it's a triangle museum, and when you arrive inside the museum, you are in the middle of a courtyard of a museum, which means that in the main first floor, which is already a space of exhibition, and it's not the entrance, you are in the middle of a courtyard with small balconies where viewers can look at you. And I found, oh wow, this is like kind of very difficult to deal with. So I had to think about a project, and I liked the way of really like dealing with this architecture, because even the director of the museum at this time, Susan Gesenheimer, she told me all the artists we had here. She told me all the artists we have at MMK did not like the buildings, and we understand it's not an easy building. You know, when you have an angle that sharp in a building is a problem. What I love, for instance, with the power plant, the walls are not straight. But you have this sort of warehouse things that works for me like white paper. You really can imagine things, you know. I'm not saying that it's bad now when the architect has done a very difficult work, because I think it can be interesting to find a way to dialogue with this energy. But it leaves you something, because I think that the work you show in that kind of space cannot be. So at some point, the space really like imposes you its authority.
Yeah, it's interesting to come back to modernist architecture. I mean, even Le Corbusier, in reference to the bricolage, right, in the sense of his style, in the sense versus Mies van der Rohe. So, but I'm wondering more beyond the architectural space. I'm thinking more like the institution itself, in the sense of programming, in the sense of this, open forum or agora, as it's been talked about. Were there kind of other institutional spaces in the functioning of programming and welcoming and creating space for discourse and events and thinking through partying that you'd kind of experienced that you drew from?
We are now dialoguing with Bernd Scherer, the director of the Haus der Kultur in der Welt in Berlin, because he came to also La Colonie, and he's running this space, which is, I think, the most interesting in Berlin. And he liked this idea of the party after the symposium. When you see Mamadou Diouf talking with Akil Mbembe, blah, 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 or I don't know. I think there's something that at the Haus der Kultur in der Welt, I would love to imagine to like create a sort of Colonie, you know? But it's not easy to look at here. I mean, I don't know about the audience. It's not easy to open this arena to to another public. It's very difficult, but it is worth to do that. It's very interesting to. So, for instance, if you look at the film I'm showing here at the power plant, which is about this comparison between the object and the bodies, and the fact that millions of artifacts are kept in ethnographic museum now, and they are for me like the witnesses of slavery, because millions of bodies were deported. I'm thinking sometimes, that's why your question, Charles, is very interesting. For now, since I did also Reasons Oxymoron and other works with psychiatrists from Africa and from the West on madness, I'm thinking about what would be to perform in a space this film, to gather all these academics that have interviewed, then edited, then built a statement thought to
following my synopsis actually. How would it work if in a space like this, for instance, I would set up the whole film with the people, one after the other behind a table, and the audience might be allowed to sit with Sylvie Memel-Cassi and talk with her about the stolen object from the Ivory Musée des Civilisations in Côte d'Ivoire, or to sit there to talk with Charmel Nelson about slavery in Canada, or to sit there to talk with Kwame Mackenzie about psychiatry related to migrants here in Canada. I have to say, I have to tell you that I'm thinking seriously on that, because it's very close to this action, you know. I'm keen to develop to again and again remove the borders that separate these invisible walls which separates us as human groups, you know?
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, I think it was Hans Ulrich's project, right? The interview project that was installed in Venice, as all these TVs to kind of sit down and as this kind of archive of these interviews in a way, much more, I guess, comprehensive than a focused talk. So it's interesting to hear that this space, as it sounds like you're saying, is almost kind of a direct extension in a way from, let's say, the sculptural work that you make, and then its incredible affect that's in the gallery, you know, these wooden sculptures, these very powerful, traumatic images, very emotional, right? And fully hitting you without even understanding what they are. In contrast to then, and in a way I would say with your work, it's one of the largest gaps within contemporary art between that very, very polished, beautiful material object, and then this pretty straight up talking heads, direct camera information of specialists. And that's quite a wide gap to go through in a single exhibition. And so what I'm hearing is you're saying that La Colonie is coming out of, in a sense, the films into an actual space of dialogue that you'd like to push a little bit more, and that's what these symposiums are for and so forth? Is that a fair trajectory?
It is, but you know, how to explain? You remember that in the film of called The Body's Legacies, which is the first part of a film in 3D parts I'm doing on the body. There's a moment where a divine is counting, is actually building the future or the problem of a guest, of a customer, on sand. It's called, this process of divination, it's called divination by the sand. And I think here you really have an example of how traditional things can be also very contemporary. Why? At certain moment, I was back in the space because I was setting light, and it happens that I arrive at this moment where you have this big screen with the circular plate and sand and fingers doing this. I think this is beautiful. It can work as a loop in the space, definitely. But if you leave it like this, it fills this gap you talk about. It becomes a video loop, contemporary artworks. But it's not my artworks, and it's not art. It's a language. And I think definitely the part of the symposiums I organize, I organize now because I also used to be part of many symposiums. I'm still, but now with La Colonie is easier because I can work with friends, invited them, and we do this there. Is probably the way, not to fill the gap, but just to give as much as possible space to what really deserve and need space. If you keep this circular plate with sand as in a loop, it's beautiful, but it does not tell you as much as it's telling actually with the whole people talking around us. And this is very important, especially here in Canada, because I have to tell you that all the First Nations people, but especially Chief Stasela Form, I have interviewed about the restitution of artifacts from museums. Very interesting also in Canada to know that, especially in British Columbia, for instance, many objects have been given back to the community. They did a lot of work here in the west of Canada. This leader, activist, indigenous, says that, you know, in terms of restitution of the object, as in terms of many things, we disagree with the First Nation indigenous. We do not agree all the time. Some people want them back because they want to claim the land. Some others, they just want to make some noise in the media. They just use the fact of getting back this object to make noise. Some other really wants them back because they are used in traditional healing process. But I have to say that I was surprising and super happy to hear that, because for me it was also a discovery. I never heard such things in Africa. It's different in Africa, because in Africa they want back the object, but the object are outside the countries. When I ask here in First Nations, it's clear in the film, does it make sense that you ask object in a country where you live? I don't know if you remember. And she said, but I do not consider myself as Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, that's
but let me continue. A very important thing, and then I'll finish about these things, Charles. One of them says something that, on the contrary, I have heard everywhere in Africa, etc., is that these objects are a language. And the problem is that these languages have disappeared. So to get them back means to find people who are able to talk to them, to reenact, to reactivate them. And this is the problem, is that many of, John Pfeffer says this also in the film, many of the people have not the language anymore. So this was the last thing. It's a language.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good moment to maybe open it up to the audience, okay, as we kind of actually deal with that new commission that was here in Toronto. So please, if we have questions about, but of course everything, if you have questions about the Colonie that Kader didn't talk about, or if you were able to see the exhibition last night and see that, or other questions based on the talk today. It's a pretty wide open gamut.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what I think I heard you say, but I'm not quite sure, when you're talking about the repair can't be repaired and the naturalness of denial. And I'm not sure how that fit with the rest of what your statement was about. And particularly the idea that the release of emotion is itself a healing and always positive. So that, for example, the Colonie, you talked about these new voices coming up that were dissents, you've got a choral going, and you were able as a moderator to step in and control that. But what happens, like in Trumpism, where somebody steps in to moderate those unleashed emotions, which have been released because of a good will of wanting to articulate these repressed, hidden feelings. What happens when that falls into the hands of a manipulator and not a moderator?
This is very interesting that you connect this notion of unrepairable repair and the field of emotion, because I really came into the field of emotion reflection when I start to understand whether the 9/11 attack were, how to say, on the one hand repairing these centuries of humiliation, the Muslim Ummah, which is Muslim Ummah is the nation of Islam, has been living since Islam has lost forever its golden age. What the Daesh, for instance, was claiming back with this, the way they set up their huge territory beyond borders, was the Caliphate. The Caliphate used to be the Islam empire. Well, empire has ruled actually the world during 7th century. So we just have to imagine that this has left some traces somewhere on both sides. There was a speech by the mentor of bin Laden, al-Zawahiri, in which he's describing clearly that it's at the end of the 90s. It was published by Gilles Kepel in France, in his book, Terreur et Martyr. And he says that we have come in a time where the worst enemy of Islam, the most powerful, America, has to collapse. And like Byzance has collapsed after 62 years, this is the speech, I'm quoting him. Now, because time has accelerated, the speed has increased, America will collapse quicker, and we need to accelerate this. But to this, we don't need to make small attack. We need to create a sort of spectacular attack that will, on both sides, repair these centuries of humiliation of the Muslims, who will wake up and think, oh, these are the strong guys. And on the other, and also needless to say that in the Sunni, to suicide until this time was the worst sin, because only God can remove your life. So this also went through a university of Sheikh in Al-Azhar in Cairo to declare that no, these people are okay. They attacked the America, but normally it's absolutely, let's say, a sin. It's not a parenthesis. It's very important to understand this because the martyrdom was not allowed in Sunni before 9/11. It was only Shia. Hezbollah is Shia. They have then set up a massive, spectacular attack. That's why you have a plane hitting a tower and then a second one. The first one was to catch the camera. The second one to make the whole worldwide freaking out. And then, what is extremely interesting at this very moment, which I think radical Islamism really took over this field of emotion, for the worst and the better. For the better for the Muslim, who were I think, yeah, definitely feeling this sort of catharsis of their humiliation. On the other hand, I don't know if you remember, but historically, George W. Bush was very low in the comment on dit les sondages en anglais, in the plots, no? Polls. He was very low at this time. I remember very well. I was following all this news. He actually used that attack to gather on the field of emotion the Christian psyche. He was the first to evoke the crusade and this axis of the devil, etc. So that's why regarding the unrepairable repair that I'm mentioning in terms of field of emotion, I think that there is a sort of Sisyphus endless process in the human groups and in civilization looking for this catharsis, actually. And what we have here are at the same time two extreme conceptions of the world, but also kind of similar as well, both fascistic, both Manichaean, both following capitalist interest also, even the radical Islamism, of course. And what is clear is that for me, so far, the moment of the reappropriation of the field of emotion that we have known, us still living today, the last one, the very important one, that could be compared with the Nazi time, is what has happened with 9/11. Because it's the use of the mass media impact of the image to really gather at a very large scale people sort of under, probably, I don't know how to articulate this, but what is definitely what helps politicians to gather communities and people, which is fear. I think 9/11 moment is the moment of the coming, the reuse of the dialectic of the fear. Bush did this, the politic of the fear, and the 9/11 too. The fear is what has been used so far by tyrants and by dictators. The fear of the others, the construction of the devil, the wild savage, the way that colonization has been diabolizing the other, the Arab, the Chinese, the others, the Indians with Hollywood, etc., with the cinematography. At La Colonie, by the way, we are preparing a symposium with a very beloved Canadian friends. I think maybe some of them know Efflux, right? Mm-hmm. And he's Brian Quenwood. He's one of the founders of Efflux. He's from Vancouver, and we're organizing a symposiums on colonization and sci-fi movies. Which you know what I mean. From the Forbidden Planet, which is, let's say, during the McCarthyism moment, probably the most relevant illustration of how, this sort of dream of colonizing a land, to colonization of the bodies as well, the cyborg things. We're going to make a very interesting symposium on that. We're going to call it the Twilight Zone Symposium.
Another question? Maybe just, well, I'll ask one more question and maybe we'll see if someone else wants to speak. I'm curious, how did the process happen in making the new commission? I mean, in regards to obviously living in Europe and coming here and it's a new work, can you just kind of maybe walk us through kind of a behind the scenes while you're here to talk about making the first part? And will the other parts be engaging Canada as well, or just part one?
It's a good question, Charles, because of course, few people, I mean, most of the people knows that oh no, sorry, maybe you don't know that, but I've been working and interested in traditional artifacts for probably the last 20 years, which is in contemporary art field not the case of many people. That's why Clémentine Delis always tells me that we had a dialogue with her because she's anthropologist and she has one leg in contemporary art and the other in ethnology. We are not that many. But what interested me here first, again, is you arrive in a land who you meet first, the First Nations. Mm-hmm. And then I have to say that since probably the history that is also spoken in the film mm-hmm. of this object, which was stolen in 1926, I think, in the 20s by the Canadian police after a potlatch made by Indian community in BC, the same mask which handed 35 years after at André Breton place in Paris, and which has been given back in 2001 or 1999, I don't remember, by his widow, Aube Breton, to the community here in Canada. I have to say that the whole, for me, the whole story about how Canada was very much innovative in the last 30 years in terms of finding a way to give back the object to the communities that were claiming back this object also motivates me to work on that. It's not like I found this mask nice. Also, of course, they are masks. They are very nice, very nice, this mask. So before to start to work on this object, I knew a little bit about the object. I knew a little bit. I also am fascinated by the story I told you before about Claude Lévi-Strauss is something that haunted me so much. I mean, the structuralism is something, is a very heavy concept in which I trust. Yeah. So
it's actually, I mean, in a weird way, watching the two of them back to back yesterday, reflecting memory from the Pompidou, the Duchamp Prize. It almost feels like the part one is the sequel to that film in a way. There's an interesting kind of parallel between the phantom limb, obviously, as this body part missing, and then the natural artifact. And I think obviously you're making those connections. They were strange, and I was wondering if you noticed if it was a conscious aspect or not, or if it's even something you noticed, that in a lot of the interviews in Reflecting Memory, there's a surprising amount of masks in the background. Most of the videos are shot with people, academics in their libraries, and they have the books behind. But there was a surprising amount of shots where there were mass, figurative sculptures, things that were surprisingly there in the background, to have as almost a precursor. And I was wondering if that was a conscious, how much scenography was there in framing, or is this something you observed afterwards?
Yeah, I did observe afterward. I mean, if you come to my studio in Berlin, please come. It's very small, extremely messy, but there are a lot of masks. I mean, I'm fascinated, by the way, not only by traditional, very, sophisticated object. I also have some spoons. André Breton was, by the way, fascinated by he was also collecting, of course, Miro painting, Giacometti sculptures, this mask from Vancouver, but he was also collecting, the cast that you use to cook waffles. He has an incredible collection of that. I think it's when they are in the Reflecting Memory, it's just by chance. I want to come to your former question. I mean, your previous question, because you were asking me, Charles, and sorry I did not answer about the second film that I want to do. Why it's important that I answer about this? It is important because it will be about the whole film I'm doing, where you can see the first part here at the power plant is about the body, but the body, how much the colonial process has actually created, has the main core stake of power, of domination, the control of the body. In France, almost a year ago, there was, probably you heard about the story here because it was a big scandal in France.
a black Congolese guy living in the suburbs, coming back at home from the soccer training, was controlled by the police. This control of the police in France, probably you don't have this in Canadian constitution, but in French constitution, any policeman can stop you in the street and say, vos papiers. Humiliation. So I've lived this for all my life, but it's never a nice moment when someone says, the car police stop like this, hey you, vos papiers. Sometimes you're going back home in the cold, in the suburbs, where my sister still live, and my mother also, and then it's like, hey, why you don't talk to me like this? No, I'm just saying, cool down. You're just the police, you have the gun, you stop me in this darkness, you say, vos papiers. No, we are following someone, vos papiers. Anyway, these days, Theo is his name, strong guy, says, no, I don't give you my paper. I'm fed up with this. So a fight started, and to make a long story short, they put him on the floor and they raped him with a truncheons. They raped the guy with this until he ended at the hospital with blood, etc. After he has spent one night at the police office. So doctors have analyzed the body and they said, but this is just not believable. What did you do to this guy? So it came out to the press, and for me, there are many stories like this. They are even worse. There are black body killed and North African body killed, like everywhere. But this, for me, was the incarnation of, again, the field of emotion. We cannot be not sensitive to this. It's such violence act. So I started to think first, how could this be not developed as an artwork, but just kept? Why kept? Because the mass media system has been speaking about this during a week in a so nasty, weird way that one day came at La Colonie a group of people, young people, black, North African, white, and they said, we are the friends of Theo. We want to create an event here at La Colonie, and we want to create a broadcast TV on the web which will release the real story, because everything that they are saying is wrong. He's not a thief, he's a clean guy, etc. And they have raped him and they have beaten him. The journalists are not doing their job. They have abandoned the story and then goes on Macron and other things. So they have created a broadcast called Parole d'honneur, which happens at La Colonie every 6-7 weeks. And they brought Theo and the parents of Theo. And rappers, I don't know, I have the video in my phone, but the Haitian philosopher Norman Najari, I don't know if you know him, Etienne Balibar came, many people came to just speak about the dignity, what means dignity. And what I found important here is that if you look through the whole history of domination of the powerful order onto the minorities, it has always been expressed on the body. Women were raped, like Jamila Boubasha during the Algerian War. She was raped with bottle of beers by soldiers, so that she would have gone to say to her sisters and brothers, look what they did to me. The scandal of Abu Ghraib jails, the torture of Abu Ghraib. We know that Abu Ghraib was a jail place also with Saddam Hussein. We all know that. Because the soldiers then claimed that, no, but it was a torture place. No, but you guys are selling democracy there. And you've been like torturing them. It came out that I really felt that I need to do something on this repressed post-colonial body. Not because I want to talk about something new. I know many people are talking about that. But I think that as much as possible, we need to, what these young people from Parole d'honneur are doing is just to own their own narrative. They don't want that the real narrative is hijacked by the media system, which is constantly playing the game of the power. So that's why I wanted to talk to you. But the second film will be about this.
Okay. All right. I think we should wrap it up pretty quick. Yep. So thank you, Kader, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.